Dean Martin was in the middle of filming the biggest Western of his career when a stunt extra hit the ground hard and didn't get back up. What Dean did in the next 60 seconds didn't just halt production on a multi-million-dollar film, it changed how Hollywood treated the people nobody cared about. John Wayne watched it all unfold and later said Dean Martin had become the bravest man he'd ever known. It was July 1958 at Old Tucson Studios in Arizona. The temperature soared past 112 degrees, the kind of heat that makes your eyeballs sweat. Dean Martin, John Wayne, and director Howard Hawks were deep into Rio Bravo, a Western that would go down as one of the greatest films ever made. But on July 23rd, something happened that nearly destroyed the entire production and revealed who Dean Martin really was off camera. Hollywood in 1958 was brutal, not glamorous like on screen, but real. Studios treated people like disposable parts. Extras, stunt performers, crew, they were invisible. If you got hurt, it was your problem. The show went on, and you either got back up or got replaced. Dean had seen it all. He'd watched people get chewed up and spat out by the machine, but he'd never had the chance or reason to intervene. He was just a singer, an entertainer, expected to show up, look cool, deliver his lines, and collect his paycheck. But something about Rio Bravo was different. Maybe it was working alongside John Wayne, a man whose presence demanded respect. Maybe it was the heat, the isolation, or the intensity of the shoot. Or maybe Dean Martin had finally reached a point where he couldn't stay silent. Whatever it was, July 23rd would be the day he stopped being just an entertainer and became something else entirely. They were filming a classic bar fight scene, chairs breaking, bodies flying, chaos everywhere. About 30 stunt performers and extras had been hired, mostly local Tucson men making $75 a day, a good wage if you survived the scene. One of them was Tommy Mitchell, 34, a former rodeo rider who had spent 5 years picking up stunt work wherever he could. He had a wife, Sarah, and 2 little girls at home. Landing a role on Rio Bravo, working alongside John Wayne and Dean Martin could have been a career-changing opportunity. Tommy's task seemed simple. Get thrown through a breakaway window, hit the ground outside, roll twice, and stay down. Easy enough for a man used to being thrown off horses. The sugar glass window was supposed to shatter safely, Hollywood standard. Tommy had done it countless times. But nobody knew the props crew had made a mistake. The breakaway frame was actually reinforced with metal. Someone had grabbed the wrong frame that morning. It looked identical, but it was built to last, not break. Action was called. The bar fight erupted, bodies flew, chairs shattered, and Tommy was hurled toward the window at full speed. The sugar glass shattered perfectly, but the metal frame didn't give. It caught him mid-air like a clothesline. A sickening crack echoed across the desert. Tommy's body twisted, and he fell 12 feet straight onto the hard-packed dirt. He didn't roll. Tommy didn't move. He lay there, motionless, dust settling around him like a shroud. The assistant director yelled, "Cut!" For a brief, tense moment, the entire set was silent. Then chaos erupted. The stunt coordinator sprinted toward Tommy. The on-set medic grabbed his bag and ran. Crew members crowded around, and Dean Martin, still in full costume with stage blood on his shirt from the fight scene, pushed through to see what had happened. Tommy Mitchell was conscious, but barely. His left arm was bent at an impossible angle. Blood poured from a gash on his head. Worse, he couldn't move his legs. The medic took one look and spoke the words everyone feared. "We need an ambulance, now. This is serious." Gerald Foster, the production manager, the numbers man, the one who made sure the film came in on budget and on schedule, appeared. He looked at Tommy and said something that made Dean Martin's blood run cold. "Get him off my set, put him in someone's car and take him to the hospital, and find out who grabbed the wrong window frame. They're fired." No concern for Tommy, no questions about whether he'd be okay. Just get him off the set like a broken piece of equipment. The medics argued. Tommy shouldn't be moved until the ambulance arrived. Foster cut them off. "We're losing light. Every minute we're not shooting costs $10,000. Move him and reset the scene." Dean Martin heard every word, and something inside him snapped. Not with a shout or a bang, but a quiet, dangerous snap. He approached Foster, calm, controlled, voice low. "What hospital are they taking him to?" "Tucson General, I guess," Foster said. "Who's paying for it?" Foster finally looked at him. "That's not our problem. He signed a waiver. These guys know the risks. It's part of the job." Dean took a steady breath. "So the studio's not covering his medical bills?" "Standard procedure. On-set care only. Anything else is his responsibility. Now, if you don't mind, reset the scene." Dean Martin repeated himself. "Reset the scene without me." Foster's face went red. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Dean said. "I'm not shooting another frame until that man's medical bills are covered." Silence fell across the set. Crew members froze. John Wayne emerged from his trailer, standing at the edge of the scene. Howard Hawks, the director, put down his script. Everyone sensed something monumental was unfolding. Foster tried to dismiss it. "Dean, come on, don't be dramatic. He signed a waiver. That's how it works." "Not anymore," Dean said. "It doesn't." Foster smirked, then tried to intimidate him. "You have a contract. You can't just refuse to work. Walk off this set and you'll never work in this town again. Warner Brothers will bury you. You'll be finished." Dean didn't flinch. "Then I guess I'm finished. But that man isn't going bankrupt because your construction crew screwed up." Silence. Absolute silence. In 1958, actors didn't defy studios. Studios held all the power. One phone call could destroy your career. Everyone knew it. Foster pressed his advantage. "You're holding up a production that employs 150 people. Every day we don't shoot, 150 people don't get paid. You really want that on your conscience?" Dean looked at the crew, electricians, camera operators, makeup artists, sound guys, all watching. Then he asked something that changed everything. "How many of you have been hurt on a set and had to pay your own medical bills?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, hands went up. 1, 3, a dozen. More than half the crew. Broken bones, concussions, burns from lights, falls from scaffolding, all paid out of their own pockets because the studio said it wasn't their problem. Dean turned back to Foster. "So it's not just Tommy, it's all of them." "Every person on this set who's been chewed up and thrown away," Dean said, his voice calm but deadly serious. "You're telling me that's just how it works?" Foster's jaw tightened. "This is a business, Martin, not a charity." "Then let me make it simple for you," Dean said, stepping closer. "Either Warner Brothers pays every penny of Tommy Mitchell's medical expenses, surgery, rehab, everything, or I walk, and I take this story with me. I'll tell every reporter in Los Angeles exactly why Rio Bravo shut down, how a man got crippled because your crew grabbed the wrong window frame and the studio refused to help him." The threat hung in the air like smoke. In 1958, Hollywood studios controlled the press, the narrative, the entire story. Dean Martin threatening reporters? That was dangerous. That could become a scandal worth millions in bad publicity. Foster's face flushed from red to purple. "You don't have that kind of power." That's when John Wayne stepped forward. The Duke had been watching in silence, and now he walked up to Foster and stood beside Dean, saying nothing. His presence alone sent a message. Whatever Dean does, I stand with him. Howard Hawks, the director, joined them, then the cinematographer, then the stunt coordinator. One by one, key members of the production closed ranks, forming a silent wall of solidarity behind Dean Martin. Foster looked around, swallowed hard. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered. If Dean walked, the movie was dead. If John Wayne walked, too, Warner Brothers would lose everything they'd invested. And if this went public, exposing the studio's treatment of injured workers, catastrophic. Foster pulled out a handkerchief, wiped his face, and muttered, "I need to make a call." He disappeared into the production office. Dean didn't move. Arms crossed, he waited. The crew didn't reset the scene. Nobody moved. Tens of thousands of dollars were ticking away with every passing minute, but nobody cared. Something bigger than money was unfolding. 20 minutes later, Foster emerged, face carefully neutral. "Warner Brothers will cover Mr. Mitchell's medical expenses, all of them. and we'll be reviewing our insurance policies for the entire crew." Dean didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded. "I want that in writing today." "You'll have it by end of business," Foster said reluctantly. "And I want to know Tommy's condition before we shoot another frame." Foster hesitated, then nodded. "Fine." Dean turned to the crew. "Anyone here want to keep working under these conditions? Speak up now, because if we do this, we do it right. Nobody else gets hurt and left behind." Nobody spoke. They didn't need to. The answer was on every face. Howard Hawks cleared his throat. "All right then, let's take the rest of the day. Give everyone a chance to cool down. We'll resume tomorrow morning." As the crew began to disperse, John Wayne pulled Dean aside. "That was the gutsiest thing I've ever seen. You know you just made yourself a target, right? The studios are going to remember this." Dean shrugged. "Then let him remember. I'm tired of pretending. I can't just watch what happens to people and do nothing." Wayne studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "You're all right, Martin. Really all right." That night, Dean went to Tucson General Hospital. Tommy Mitchell was in surgery. His wife, Sarah, sat in the waiting room, terrified, clutching a hospital bill estimate that could have bankrupted them. Dean sat down beside her. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Dean Martin. I was there when your husband got hurt." Is he going to be okay?" Sarah asked, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "The doctors are doing everything they can," Dean said gently. "But I need you to know this. Warner Brothers is paying for everything, every penny. Surgery, rehab, lost wages. You don't have to worry about the money." Sarah stared at him, stunned, unable to comprehend. "What? How?" "Because what happened to your husband wasn't his fault," Dean said, his voice steady, "and it's not right that you should suffer for it." Sarah broke down again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was relief. Dean stayed with her until Tommy came out of surgery. 3 long hours, sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair, sipping terrible coffee, just being there, because nobody else from the production had. Tommy Mitchell survived. The surgery repaired most of the damage to his arm, though he never regained full mobility. His back healed, and he could walk again, though with a limp. He never did stunt work again, but Warner Brothers paid all $18,000 of his medical bills. 6 months later, they even hired him as a stunt coordinator, where he could use his experience without risking his body. Rio Bravo resumed production the next day. Dean Martin was quieter than usual, but he was there. John Wayne looked at him differently now. Respect, admiration, something close to reverence. The crew, too, they'd walked through fire for Dean Martin, not because he was a star, but because he had stood up when it mattered. The studio tried to retaliate. Dean's next 3 film offers were mysteriously withdrawn. Projects he was supposed to star in went to other actors. The blacklist was real. But Dean had something the studio hadn't counted on: John Wayne's loyalty, Howard Hawks spreading the truth about what happened on set, and a crew that wouldn't forget. Within 6 months, the story of Dean Martin on the Rio Bravo set became a legend in Hollywood. Not in press, the studios made sure of that, but among the people who actually made movies, the grips, the gaffers, the stunt performers, the extras. Dean Martin had become more than a star. He had become a hero. In 1959, the Screen Actors Guild passed new insurance requirements for productions. Studios were now required to carry comprehensive coverage for all performers, including extras and stunt workers. The change was directly influenced by what happened on Rio Bravo. Dean never took credit, but everyone knew. Tommy Mitchell stayed in touch with Dean for the rest of his life. Every Christmas, Dean received a card from Tommy, Sarah, and their daughters, and every Christmas, Dean called them, not for publicity, not for show, just because he cared. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Tommy Mitchell was there at the funeral. By then, he was 71, walking with a cane, his arms still slightly crooked from that day in the Arizona heat. A reporter asked him what Dean Martin meant to him. Tommy looked at the reporter and said, "Dean Martin saved my life.
Not just that day on the set, my whole life. He taught me that you don't have to be powerless just because someone tells you you are. He showed me that standing up for what's right matters more than keeping your job. The reporter pressed him, but he was a big star. That must have made it easier to take the risk. Tommy shook his head. No, it wasn't easy. He risked everything that day, and he did it for me, a guy he didn't know, a guy nobody cared about except my family. That's not a big star move. That's a good man move. And Dean Martin, he was a good man. The story of Rio Bravo is usually told as a classic Western. John Wayne in his prime, Howard Hawks directing, Dean Martin proving he could act, not just sing. All of that is true. But there's another story buried in that film. A story that never made it into press kits or promotional materials. A story about what happens when someone with power decides to use it for others, not themselves. On July 23, 1958, Dean Martin stopped a production. He risked his career, his reputation, his future. He stared down a studio executive and refused to back down. And he did it for a man he'd never met, a stunt extra named Tommy Mitchell, whose life could have been destroyed by medical bills. That's not just a story, that's a blueprint for how to be human, a reminder that fame and fortune mean nothing if you don't use them to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Dean Martin wasn't a crusader, he wasn't a revolutionary, he was just a man who saw something wrong and refused to look away. Rio Bravo became one of the greatest westerns ever made, but the real heroism on that set happened off-camera, in the blistering Arizona heat, in a moment when Dean Martin chose principle over profit, a stranger's welfare over his own career, and stood up to say, "Not on my watch." The crew who witnessed it never forgot. They told their children, their grandchildren. The story spread through Hollywood like wildfire, not in newspapers, not on TV, but in the places where real people worked, where decency mattered more than fame. Dean Martin made a lot of movies, he sang a lot of songs, he made millions of people laugh, cry, and feel something. But on that day, in that heat, on that Western set that nearly claimed a life, he did something far more important than entertain. He stood up, he spoke up, he refused to let the machine grind up another human being. That's the Dean Martin story that should be told. Not the cool guy with the martini glass, not the Rat Pack singer with effortless charm. The man who stopped a movie set and said, "Fix this or I walk." The man who risked everything for a stranger. Because that's not just courage, that's character.